All right, we're live. We're live. What's up, Neil? Right on time, even though I'm not. So, how's everyone doing tonight? Welcome to tonight's Redspin Sports. We had a week hiatus last week, but we're back at it. Just got actually today recording a really fun interview. Actually, let me get my headset on here actually, so people can actually hear me. So I apologize. I thought I had it. Now, can you hear me? Now, can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you. We can hear you.
Yes. All right. So so I apologize. I just didn't get my headset on there. But welcome back. I am coming at you from about I don't know, 10 miles or so across the rivers, and a few, as the crow flies, maybe even less than 10 miles from Michael Sampson, brother Flourish. He's back in the saddle with us tonight. I actually missed, we were supposed to do a political miss Joe today on Radio Sputnik, but it was probably enough for a better mic. I'm sure held it down. But they talked a lot about the Sean Watson and the sexual assault, allegations that are quickly mounting up, and Mike has got a level of expertise on that that's pretty solid. Definitely want to hear from him. You got Miguel Garcia, repeat guest on tonight from at Sports is a Weapon podcast out in Sacramento, California. I believe you're in Sacktown tonight, right?
Yes. Thank you for having me back on the show.
Can you hear us, Miguel?
Yeah, I'm in Sacramento.
Mm-hmm. Always got to have my boom. And we got, if you can't have Barry Manilow, Miguel's the next best thing, right? Well, got the perfect radio voice, man. Perfect radio voice. Love it. So anyways, we were, I was interviewing Don Dolan, a.k.a. Gary Bretcher, the War Nerd, who hosts the show Radio War Nerd, one of the biggest followers on Patreon, actually. He was with the Exile and covering post-Soviet Russia in the 90s, and then with NSFW Corps, and just also one of the most just knowledgeable people about like literally almost every country's military history, insurgencies, especially in Ireland, the Sinn Féin and stuff. But we talked about identities in sport, and connecting the Confederacy and a lot of these like neo-Confederate ideologies and fan bases in Southern, in the Deep South. I guess Miguel kind of cut out there. Mike, are you with us? Anyways, I'll riff here for a second until I hear y'all get back. But it was fascinating conversation, so look for that to come out. We also got part 2 of the conversation with Professor Derek White about HBCU sporting congregations and basically during the Jim Crow South, and the way that within the Jim Crow South, people like Jay Gaither, Eddie Robinson, and the real leaders of these HBCU programs were a place of organization, a place of really it was a way of dealing with Jim Crow and developing communities that as a means of surviving and trying to flourish within a repressive and extraordinarily repressive social order. So welcome, Mike. Real quick, what's on your radar today? Maybe you could summarize real quick what you, Bob, and Michelle talked about with Political Misfits earlier about the whole Deshaun Watson case. I think that'd be interesting. We're going to get into talking about these NFL owners, and tonight's going to be the first installment of that. We're going to do it in 8 installments. We're going to talk about 4 owners tonight, 4 teams, that is, the New York Jets, Woody Johnson, the Jacksonville Jaguars, Shahid Khan, and Miguel's with the Davis family, the Oakland, now Las Vegas Raiders. And we actually talked about that with the War Nerd, who I was mentioning earlier. The interview just I had a couple hours ago, who was a big Raiders fan, and a lot of the identity, one of those multinational fan bases, and also rarely Al Davis, one of the few people that you could never imagine someone who just came up, as a coach, actually becoming an owner in this day and age. I think that's a testament to neoliberalism and the way in which, just the amount of money that's involved in this stuff is just astronomical. Al Davis was a coach, right? I mean, he coached the Raiders. He wasn't just some suit his whole life. And as Miguel researched, I mean, certainly they're wealthy. The family his son is, but they're nowhere wealthy. Their wealth is anywhere near the level of most of these NFL owners. So we'll hear a little bit about that. But Mike, maybe give us the breakdown or anything else. Go ahead, Miguel. Yeah.
Yeah, they're just lower. They're lower on the rankings of the richest owners, but they're still, this new stadium's pretty much gave the team more value.
Yeah. Well, but it's also interesting. One thing we got into, and is that with the thing about the Raiders, though, is that Pete Rozelle, looking at that relationship and the antagonistic relationship Davis had, I think there were very much class dynamics. I mean, Davis came up from a working class Jewish family in like Brockton, Massachusetts. And, so he's like nouveau riche, basically. Eventually came across some money enough to buy an AFL team, which was not on anywhere the part of the NFL. But his level of wealth is not anywhere comparable to like the blue blood people of the NFL, like the Wellington Mars, the Mara family that owned the New York Giants, and George Allen, or George Preston Marshall, that owned the Washington Redskins at the time, Washington football team, and so many others of these teams that are the Hallis family in Chicago. So we're going to get into that. They all have their own relationships to the means of production, and with Mark Davis, his son, it's a little different. But Mike, let's go ahead and tell us about what the latest with Deshaun Watson. If you maybe give us a little update on what's going on with Houston Texans quarterback.
Yeah, what's up, everybody? So, we, I guess, on Political Misfits earlier, Bob and Michelle, the topic of Deshaun Watson came up, and of course, I guess this will really be the first time we've talked about it on Redspin Sports. I think last time we recorded, I believe it was 2 weeks ago. There have been like a couple, allegations of sorts, but not to the point of we have like 16 different, allegations against him, all with a very similar thread in regards to, they were massage therapists, made inappropriate acts, some sexual assault, intentionally physically coercing himself upon these women allegedly. And it's just really, really sick shit, like really sick stuff, kind of to read about and see about. Of course, like everybody deserves their day in court, but after a while, we are a show that believes victims, and that's a lot, so I think a lot of times there was like an initial harsh reaction, especially in light of the dynamic that he was kind of going through as a player with like Texas ownership, for folks to really like look at, set allegations when like they initially happened within that first week or so, and kind of read it for what it is. But Pandora's box has been opened against Deshaun Watson, and a lot of skeletons that I'm sure he never thought would come out, allegedly are coming out in very strong fashion against him. And we it's a dynamic that I think he's kind of going to have to deal with the consequences of it. But kind of like a lot of the conversation was about there was that proposed idea that with the athletes, they're put on a different pedestal in which they don't learn responsibility, in the same way that like a normal person, like who wasn't like superior physically, wouldn't have to learn. I kind of didn't agree with that assertion. I most athletes, majority, 99.
Yeah, so tell me what you think. Yeah. Well, what's problematic about that primarily, you think?
So I think athletics, I think there is a power, when you're really good at something, physically, you've been nurtured to do that, you have a different sense of like what you can do and what you can't do. That's why, we always talk about on this show that psychology that a lot of athletes, especially collegiate athletes or even high school athletes, when they can't keep playing, due to due to like their skills, injuries, not being tall enough, big enough, that kind of emotional sort of toll it takes on them, and not having their identity because their identity was created around being this athlete. Well, that exists, but we also have to acknowledge the counterpoint in which you could say that, oh, because you're an athlete and really good at it, and because you've been used by, these institutions that make money off of like kids playing the sport, because of that, a lot of these athletes, I think it's true to say some of them do develop a huge ego complex, that creates a power dynamic in their head in which they feel as though they are free of accountability. In the same way that, these allegations against Deshaun Watson, the sheer volume points to a trend, a very intentional trend.
Can you summarize the allegations just for the listeners that might be hearing about this for the first time?
Well,
just to give you an alert, Clay Travis, Mr. Opportunist here, is exploiting this. If you look on the screen there, you see that. Hey, Jamel Hill, will you be speaking out in support of the 14 brave and courageous minority women, as if Clay Travis gives two shits about them? Who have accused the powerful $100 million athlete in Deshaun Watson of sexual assault. # believe all women, right? So there we go. We already getting hit with the contradictions. So, Mike, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. There's also a lag here too. So I'm not it's kind of when I'm speaking, I'm not hearing what Mike's saying right away. We gotta, hopefully that'll catch up here for whatever reason. But yeah, go ahead, Mike.
No, I think to summarize it, these are all, massage therapists that he has met through acquiring their services. And in those interactions, he allegedly has been assaulting them or engaged in serious, sexual misconduct. There's one report about him, asking for the massage therapist to massage his inner thighs, then, something happens after that, that's a report that's out there. It's just a lot of stuff that's kind of just, wow, we didn't even know, no one ever, with Deshaun Watson, you've never heard not a smidge of negativity in regards to quote unquote character concerns, so this is coming out of left field for a lot of folks. And I think that's why, and a lot of times, and that's why you haven't, Clay Travis is, he doesn't really give a shit about believing women. And he's only really criticizing Jamel Hill because Deshaun Watson's a black quarterback who's now being, accused of this. He wants to point the finger back at him. But overall, I think something will have to happen in terms of the NFL if it turns out, if the claims, the allegations are validated, and as that happens. But also, Clay Travis, I don't think Travis has been speaking out against, other current players who've been accused of assault, like Ben Roethlisberger and other folks that,
Well, yeah. Only if he can see an angle for it to help his brand, right? So it's pretty crazy. One thing that you mentioned the inner thigh thing. Also as somebody with serious degenerative disc disease and muscle spasms all over the body, it's a tricky thing. I get regular massage therapy, and it's there's got to be an understanding, there's got to be a level of trust, there's got to be also a real breakdown of what the situation is, because that's a sensitive area. And
with that story though, it was the inner thigh, and then somehow he has an erection and stuff ejaculates in people's faces. That's literally one of the reports. So that's a little bit, I understand that's actual abductive injuries are legit. I have a massage therapist. I go to massage therapists. It's legit, but it kind of some it just was 14, man, like 14.
Especially when one of
No,
the accusations has to do with
no.
Had to do with oral sex, like trying to force them.
Yeah,
that was the ones that just came out.
Absolutely.
Let's
be real. These aren't just people he's like it's not like he's known these women for a long time. He's been hitting these women up on Instagram. It's not like there's any kind of understanding at all. Like they think they're just going to work on a client, right, in a very professional like business transaction type thing. And he clearly has a very different understanding of what's about to go down. And therein lies the problem. Like it gets to me. I don't know what you think about this, Miguel or Mike. I mean, Clemson, like we've seen Oral Roberts making this run. You don't know much Oral Roberts, but like literally, that's been like literally the jokes have been like on Twitter. But the real big issue is the fact that you can be expelled for any homosexual activity, right? Behavior. You can be like women, female students have an earlier curfew, which harkens back to the idea like female temptress figures, right? And then being like the archetypal like temptress figure, ruin, bring down good men. So like a lot of this is in the news now. We talked about Liberty University before, and like the NCAA has got equality written all over the courts. But look at Clemson; they're a public school, but Davos Sweeney runs it like a Bible type academy. I think there's a lot of sexual repression type stuff where there's like unhealthy understandings of sexuality and expressions of sexuality. And I think it's not to excuse Deshaun Watson. I'm just talking about a larger issue now. It's a society. We live in a very sexually repressed society, but then also one where like rape culture is a major thing too. And I don't think the two are like contradictory. I think that like the fact that we're so kind of repressed, level in parts of the country and parts in a lot of different spaces, like a lot of these religious type spaces, and people grow up in that, it leads to a lot of perverted type fetish stuff that then leads to very harmful behaviors. That's my take, but any of y'all can hop in on that.
Even just the culture of college athletics recruiting, like we know they do a lot of shady stuff. Not even players should get paid, but they pay players under the table or get them free stuff. I know a story from a couple guys that went to USC that I played high school football with. This is in the mid 2000s, but one of their recruitment trips with the rest of the team, and they were 18, so they were either 17 or 18, so they might have not been old enough, but they took them to a strip club, and that was one of the pitches they used for recruitment. So this is already like in the culture as well.
Yeah, we gotta touch on Deshaun Watson from Georgia. Deshaun Watson from Georgia. Speaking of Georgia, Nate, have you read about the case of former Valdosta high school coach Rush Probst? Y'all know about that? So Rush Probst.
Well, yeah, he was the guy that used to be on the MTV. So the MTV show 2 days, right? Like back in the day,
he was
2004, 2005.
Yeah, Hoover High School.
About Hoover High with John Parker Wilson's brother, the Alabama quarterback. What's going on with him about Austin now, Mike?
No, it's a really crazy story. So Rush Probst, did amazing things at Hoover High School. A lot of very sketchy things. Also, like he, found out that he had a whole second family that he was taking care of. Paying allegations of paying, top players, high school players to play. So he comes to Valdosta High School after, their coach gets fired. So he comes to Valdosta High School. So this story basically gets blown up because the head of the booster club, high school booster club named Nubs, exposes Rush Probst. Says that Rush Probst wanted to make the booster club into a slush fund for him and his new family to make, to survive. Mm-hmm. But also he accused, he said Alabama and Georgia pay players $50,000, $100,000 here or there, which is we already know. And good for those players. Get what you do, get what you deserve even more. But also, he alleges that Hoover High School football program would get money from the Hoover Police Department from forfeiture and seizures when they would seize somebody's pickup and auction it off. The police department would drop money into
asset forfeiture. Yeah.
Of course, the Hoover Police Department denies that this ever happening, but it's so believable. And this guy is such an unsavory character.
Allegation too.
Oh yeah, like he's like flying. He's like paying players like families $100,000 to fly from California to play for 1 year because he says stuff like real grimy stuff. But it's just I just find that interesting, the Hoover Police Department connection of supporting football programs, especially high school football programs. I found that pretty funny.
Now, are you talking about? What about at Valdosta? Did you mean to say Hoover, or are you talking about?
Yeah, so he's
did he go from Hoover to Valdosta High? For those who don't
he
know,
went to Valdosta High. Well, he went to another
high school in Lowndes.
So he went to another high school. Apparently, I'm gonna try to pull it up. But before Valdosta, but of course, he got fired again because it's really wild stories. When he was at Hoover High School, him actually getting journalists fired who was investigating the football program and money because like a journalist from the local paper, is investigating the football program and rush probes, and then all of a sudden that person gets fired the next day. Like that's the amount of power he had as a football coach. Even in like local politics. So apparently at Valdosta, his antics of paying high school players, manipulating the system, and also doing other stuff off the field, followed him, and I think he was recently suspended, and he'll be getting terminated, I believe. He was placed on administrative leave as of March 11th for improper benefits. So he was, according to the Georgia High School Association, it alleges that he arranged for improper benefits to players' parents to move their sons into the school district. And I think this was around, it was a star recruit named Garcia who signed with University of Miami. Nate, you follow recruiting still actively or not? Probably that much.
Yeah, I mean, I a little bit right now, not as much as have in the past. But I just want to say though about Valdosta in Lowndes County, this is like, for those familiar with the TV show and the movie Friday Night Lights, this is like about an hour, a little over an hour away from Jacksonville, hour and a half at the most, Jacksonville, Florida. That is. I'm actually down in my hometown right now, teaching remotely, my day job from down here. This week and visiting the fam. So Valdosta is actually a local media market here, and it is like a Friday Night Lights, like 20,000 people packed in the stands for high school football type place, win at all costs mentality. So no, I'm not familiar with the specific recruit, Mike, but it's I think people really should just Google like Valdosta, Georgia, like Friday Night Lights or like football culture, and you will be blown away by like what you'll see, the power dynamics and like what it means to be a head coach at either Valdosta High or Lowndes County, being the larger county that Valdosta is a part of. So yeah.
Can y'all see my screen?
I don't know. We have a lag. We have a bad lag going on now, and I'm trying to figure out something to do with it. I wish
Miguel, can you see my screen?
Frustrated.
Yeah, I can see your screen.
You see it?
Yeah, here we go. Add the stream.
I can see Nate's screen too. It kind of breaks up a little bit because of the lag, probably.
Oh, wow.
But yours is clear, Michael.
Well, I guess in this article it says during a meeting with Nelson, Probst got up out of his chair and closed off the door. Then Probst suggested that the Bulldogs and Crimson Tide pay their recruits $90,000, $100,000 to sign with them. Probst also suggested A Georgia booster paid Bulldog star Nick Chubb a total of $180,000 in 3 installments to return for his senior season in 2017. Chubb, of course, denied the allegations. In an earlier sworn disposition as part of a civil suit by former Valdosta head coach Alan Rudemaker, Nelson accused Probst of paying star quarterback Jake Garcia's parents $2,500 per month for rent and other expenses after they moved from California to Valdosta last summer. The Garcias made the cross-country move after high school in California was delayed because of the pandemic, and he only played one game because he was ruled ineligible. And this is sort of a crazy story. This family literally moved, his son's a star recruit, is going to Miami to play football. In order to meet the eligibility requirements, the family legally separates. Like the husband and the wife. Like, this is the kind of stuff that people are going.
This is how deep they went.
This is how deep, yes. This is how deep, people go for the sport. Like, after leaving Valdosta, Garcia transferred to Grayson High School in suburban Atlanta, where he led him to a state championship. Garcia, the number 18 player in the ESPN 300, signed with Miami and enrolled in a university. So think about those parents, man. Those parents were like on it. They're like, oh, my son is going to be Peyton Manning one day. So we're going to go out and do anything we can to make sure that we're going to move to freaking Georgia. Like, our whole family's in Cali. We're just going to
across the whole country. It's not like another state. They literally went across the whole country.
Across the country. No. Now, I think stores like that, stores like that is what really always captivates me with athletics, like kind of showing that. Of course, this family, something about like being an athletic star, it's like a meal ticket that these people, families see in their child, and they have to nurture and develop it. And you have these institutions that are just all going in on trying to get what they can out of these athletes, while they can. I don't know if you had any thought on that, Miguel.
Like, just the thought of them moving, like, I'm from California, like moving from way over here all the way to Georgia just for the opportunity, and then also because of a pandemic that they didn't play their games. That's a trip. Like, I'm sure they're not the only ones, but usually when I hear stories about this, they move to other cities,
And it's interesting. Like, I never really thought. Okay, I did. I never really have recently, since football season's been over the past couple months. Well, at least 2 months, but then high school athletics. Thinking about the families that moved from quote unquote lockdown states to the South, or states that were more open, like a Utah.
Yeah, so even not just even high school, but like even the youth sports. When I was doing my research on, because I did a podcast on the youth sports reopening, and all these parents started like a movement against it. It was mostly it's majority white people, like with money, that started the movement. But obviously it involves a lot of people throughout the state that joined it, because it was a Facebook group. But I guess kids would be going to Arizona or Nevada because they will let you play over there and not in California. So, and then that was what's happening in other states as well. But California is such a big state and like makes a lot of money, but Arizona is like really close by. So
yeah, no, it's I don't know. That's an interesting dynamic. I think California is one of those states that, you always get the association, at least in Florida, like how California is talked about amongst the, kind of mainstream, right wing kind of media.
Yeah, we're like California's a liberal state or socialist state.
Yeah, they're like California's a hellhole. You know what I'm saying?
It's a very neoliberal state, really.
Very neoliberal, but then it's like almost since like the South is like there's not even an advancement to neoliberal. Like like you can't even get to like tokenizing like politics or like kind of like bullshit diversity stuff because this something else is still ruling that doesn't even want to get there.
Still kind of like a I don't know, like maybe like a plantation politics type of with the racism and stuff. Do you think the policy is there?
Yeah, I think he's in a. Yeah, no, it is. I mean, I think it's very much like that. I mean, I think it's where you see the weapon of national oppression by imperialism. With a super emphasis in regards to stripping away the basic like democratic rights,
voting rights
for one. Returning citizens who commit a felony being able to get their rights restored. I mean, that's a struggle here. In other places, that's just how it should be. You should have your right to vote. We had in other states, I see Fox News and other, right wing kind of media outlets criticizing, more liberal states for giving vaccines to inmates.
Oh yeah, seen that.
The governor of Florida, he's like, of course, he says we're going to focus on the law-abiding population first. I mean, pure just like anti-human shit,
He knows his audience, though, or his supporters, his voters, his base.
No, he does.
That's the kind of crap that's just the kind of stuff they want. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah, they do. I mean, I think he's definitely a person that I guess is following in the footsteps of Donald Trump and stuff like that. But just that idea, and how it affects all of society. I know we had talked about going over these NFL owners. So maybe we'll wait till Nate is able to hop back on before we hop into that. Miguel, have you had any kind of sports news this week? Have you been watching the tournament and all that?
Yeah. Yeah, so I have been watching the tournament, kind of been, reading a lot about the Oral Roberts stuff.
Yeah, that's wild.
Especially that the sport folks were tweeting about. Because I figured, I knew Oral Roberts was like a Christian university, kind of like Liberty University, schools like that. But I've never really looked into the history of that school,
Yeah, I saw Nate was, Oral Roberts was a American evangelicus.
Mm-hmm. Which a lot of these religious universities are from evangelicalism, where they started off at.
One of the founders of Prosperity Gospel. He was Choctaw? What the fuck? Yeah.
Just like everyone's giving in the mainstream sports media, Oral Roberts, the Cinderella story. But if you really dig deep into the school, you see all these, homophobic policies and all this other stuff.
Yeah, I mean that's the real creepy part about these religious sort of colleges, super creepy. Think about Liberty University, founded by Jerry Falwell. They have students there. They have to take a vow of something. I won't drink or smoke or engage in infidelities and stuff like that. Stuff that at most colleges, I guess public universities, you don't really have to deal with. But yeah, just a really creepy system, and how kind of you've seen, like in the case of Liberty University, they their head coach is former Ole Miss head coach Hugh Freeze, who was terminated for marriage infidelities, I believe, or hiring. He was hiring. So
the contradiction of what their religious school is kind of based on.
Yeah. So Hugh Freeze, the coach, I think he got caught up with a sex worker, or he got caught up hiring sex workers for the recruits. One of the two. But he was hired as the head coach of Liberty University. You got to forgive at winning football games. Forgives, does a lot for your atonement.
And I know they were in a bowl game this year.
Yeah, they've been pretty good, but they've done a deliberate investment in their
in the football
in
program.
their football program, because they understand the football program is how the university really, gets out there, expands itself.
Yeah, and they're big, I think, donors to Trump.
Yeah, they're like right-wing evangelicals. The Jerry Falwell Jr. recently had to resign.
Yeah, he did, right?
Yeah, because he got caught with that picture of his secretary, and he had what looked like some wine in his hand, and she was pregnant, but then they were on a boat, her zippers were unzipped. It was just, very inappropriate.
The opposite of the image that the whole university
behavior,
tries to portray.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So,
and then the whole March Madness tournament with them putting the equality stuff on the courts. What was that? You see that?
Yeah, the equality stuff on the courts, especially in light of recently, there was a huge discrepancy shown with what the women and the men got. The men, the weight rooms, of former, some women collegiate athletes.
Yeah, it was Sedona Prince, right, that did the tweet.
Yeah, I'm posting on social media about showing the different food that the men got and the women got.
You saw the video, right?
So the men, they have trays of beef, some mashed potatoes, stuff that
top-notch catering food that the pros would get.
Yeah, okay. So maybe not top-notch, but definitely good.
Solid.
You would go up there, and and get it, maybe 1 or 2 servings. The women got these packaged meals that really look like, what you get when you're standing after school.
Yeah, like the really not very nutritious food you get at lunch at school.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, and then of course with the weight room, the women had a dumbbell set.
Yeah.
That they had a dumbbell set while the men had like 5 squat racks, power racks. So obviously discrepancy. Apparently
they put some more. They got some more equipment. It still looks kind of empty to me, but it is better than what it was. But their whole excuse from the NCAA was, "Oh, we don't have enough space." But in the video she showed, there was all this space.
Yeah, no, 100%. I'm trying to let Nate back in, and I don't even see how I'm able to do that. Give me a second. Yeah, very suspect behavior. Let me figure this out, Miguel. But you a Sacramento Kings fan?
No, I'm from Southern California, so I'm a Laker fan. I'm anime.
You just go to school in Sacramento.
So I work here in Sacramento. I actually went to school in grad school in San Jose State. So I lived in San Jose before I moved up to Sacramento.
The Spartans, right?
Yep. John Carlos, Tommy Smith.
Yeah. This is a former Jaguars tight end, Josh Oliver.
Oh yeah, Josh Oliver. Mm-hmm.
Who they traded to the Ravens.
Yeah, he just got traded, right?
Yeah, he just kept getting injured. He seems like a cool player. Yeah. I don't know how to.
Josh Oliver from Florida?
No, is he? No, I know he went to school in San Jose State.
Yeah, I know for college. I wonder where he's from.
But I don't think he's from. He got drafted in the 3rd round by the
Jaguars. Yeah.
Yeah. But he's not. He plays for the Ravens. I mean, hopefully he can recover his foot injury.
Yeah, because he just got drafted 2 years ago.
Yeah, he's fairly. Yeah, He's been in the league only 2 years. He's just been hurt. He's had serious injuries. I mean, and that's the other dynamic about these athletes is, their body is a commodity.
Yeah. So
And once
speaking
it
of
breaks,
something, well, much not a little, I guess it's not an injury, it's worse. But so in Sacramento, with COVID and everything, when I was talking earlier, they started playing sports again. So now they're playing high school football. There's been games that have been canceled because people get COVID. But this past weekend, some football player actually collapsed on the field at some Sacramento high school, and he actually passed away. So I'm not sure. They haven't said why he passed away, but I'm thinking, what if it was COVID? Because you know how people got the inflammation in their heart, even from like a mild case when they started playing. And so that's how some players haven't even came back, like pro players. There was a pitcher for the Red Sox that couldn't play because of that. So I'm wondering if that might be one of the reasons, but it just kind of like it's really fucked up, honestly. Like, I know the kids wanted to play, but it was just kind of, to me, it's kind of soon. But something tragic already happened like that.
Good to have Nate back. I think with the COVID and the sports, I think we live in like 560 different Americas. I mean,
yep.
Because like they use like I said in the earlier recording we did, they use sports here to push opening up. You know what I'm saying?
That's pretty much what happened here in California.
Yeah, it's the same strategy. It's almost like the ruling class follow the same playbook, it's just at a different time speed. Like in Florida and these so-called, right-wing Republican Rand states, they push forth with opening up, like, just a full laissez-faire, while the quote-unquote lockdown states kind of did it in a very piecemeal approach. They still want to, do all that stuff, but how they use sports really as this, we have to get these kids out there and playing sports, because if not, they're going to go crazy. And
yeah, that was pretty much the talking points that this group did here in California, because I joined their Facebook group to kind of just do my research.
The thing is, they're going crazy anyway. They're going crazy in schools now, like in Florida. Like, yeah. So I just had to say, like, with that.
Can y'all hear me or not?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you.
My thing, I totally support high school sports being played. Like, I don't know why that we should say that shouldn't be. If they're playing outside, like, it's totally different than opening up schools. Like these, why are we telling kids that? I don't think there's a huge transmission rate with youth. And I think that in New Jersey, I know they've used a much more cautious approach than down in Florida. But now, as a result of that, they're having a lot more success, and they're not having a lot of spikes with sports, and it's providing a huge mental health boost to a lot of kids. It's a big difference of when they're pushing to get back because the NFL wants to make money. They're not making money off of high school, middle school, youth sports. So I don't understand why some people are against that necessarily, I guess. And maybe I'm wrong. Tell me why I'm wrong if I am.
Well,
but
you're a teacher, right? So
yeah,
you kind of have a different point of view than maybe some of the other people do, like myself, because that's not a teacher.
Yeah,
when you coach too, so
yeah,
kind of have that point of view too. Because I think I don't really mind them playing. It would just, I guess, some of the risks that not with them getting sick, but like I was telling Michael, someone passed away that played football this past weekend in Sacramento. So I don't know why. It could be anything, but I was just wondering, maybe he had the inflammation from COVID, like some players. So I guess that's kind of one of the things that worried me. But
I got you. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. I'm just trying to throw it. It's a good conversation.
University of Florida had star player Keontae Johnson. He actually had he actually fell out on the court.
Yeah, the player, right?
Yeah. I'm very familiar with that. He's been coaching ever since. The idea that but what's going to be weird for him is there's nothing they can definitively point to. His family insists it's not COVID related. The doctors say it's not. So, he's going to have to make a decision at some point whether he's ever feels comfortable playing the game again, right? I mean, that's just, there's been situations in basketball with tall players too, like over the years that have passed out, had heart failure. There's so much we just don't know about, obviously, about this virus. My problem is that, like, what are we going to do? Not have like youth sports for years and have a whole generation? Because I don't think this is going away like in totality anytime soon. You hear this like triumphant talk from like, the Biden administration say, oh, we got rid of Trump. It's all going to be, I think we're just have to rethink how we do things, and a lot more stuff will have to be like outdoors. Basketball, I know they've had to they don't have any crowds. I mean, they've been playing high school basketball in New Jersey. In fact, in New York City is the only place around the whole tri-state area where they don't have high school sports. And like one of the biggest movements is like kids in New York City that are like that are just infuriated, that are enraged, and like they're like, why are they able to why can they play across the river, and then we're told we can't play anything? It's sort of those are sort of the questions that but what's problematic is how this is all tied up into like a very polarized political discourse and how it's framed in mainstream media, which is really BS and doesn't relate to working class people. It's like, oh, the Republicans are open up. Oh, the Democrats are like and then you have like the rich like MSDNC liberals that they're coming at it from like a sort of like, oh my God, we're such good people, we're all like we're better than like every like these poor people in the hood that are out like doing whatever. We're staying home. Well, if you pay people like would be much more likely to stay home. But a lot of people, working class people, don't have a choice other than staying home. And so there's so many levels of complication to it. And it's like, to me, like I know in New Jersey, what they've done is they did not just open it up like in Florida. All right, I think like just randomly, but they waited for more science and more data to come in. And then obviously it's like, it's a lot different. Those sports aren't making a bunch of money. So there's not this like business like pressure that you see with like Division I college football. I mean, I don't know if you noticed, Mike, that they're playing Division I FCS, HBCU college football season is happening right now.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're paying attention, and if you had any thoughts, I've been following. I think just to maybe put COVID on the side real quick, what are your thoughts about the whole Deion Sanders thing? I think it's kind of interesting about the possibilities of him being there, getting Jackson State, getting HBCUs on TV more, being seen front and center more. You saw the Mocker, the star player in California, commit to Howard over Kentucky. And you have games on ESPN regularly. I just watch Jackson State and Alabama State. I mean, the whole issue of them playing or not is one thing, but they are. And on the issue of HBCU sports, they just had Professor White on, and one thing about that he talked about is, I mean, there was a clear effort. Like there was a dynasty, FAMU football in the 50s and 60s. Bob Hayes. You can just go down the list of guys who played in the NFL. They were, Al Davis from the Raiders, like made it, was one of the early trailblazers of like going and getting.
Yeah, he would get players from there.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. And like, so like, I'm hopeful that with some of the spotlight, whatever people, Deion Sanders, I mean, his politics, he's got to show on Barstool and stuff, but I do feel good for for the students and the athletes at Jackson State for once, like them not just being an afterthought now, and that like there's maybe that if Deion Sanders comes in there, maybe there will be a little bit more attention, and maybe that can be a vehicle for like shining the light on larger inequities, because if it's out of sight, out of mind, no one's going to even care. And the reality is the predominantly white institutions, when integration happened, they basically made a pact to ensure that none of them would play HBCUs, because they were fearful that they wanted to basically put them out of business and then bring them back in as like a much lower competition that was just like what they call a money game, where you bring in a lower opponent just to basically whoop their ass at the end of the year, cut them a check.
First game of the season.
Yeah, and those schools rely on those games athletic departments, because they don't have the big donor base that these big schools. Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
No, that's crazy. I mean, think about it from even if you look at it from like from a Marxist, a class analysis, from think about segregation and Jim Crow as means of national oppression and oppressing, African Americans in the Deep South from institutions that are able to compete at the same level as, white institutions, like predominantly white schools, their athletic departments, their football programs, really, really took off. I mean, you had rich history, but, I think is James Coleman, who hops on the show sometimes, at Big Game James _ 36. He was the one who, he always talks about how Bear Bryant at one point supported segregation, and then he played USC, who had desegregated their athletic teams, and saw how.
Well, yeah, that was a famous game. Yeah, right.
Yeah, and then after that, the state of Alabama desegregated. And
but I gotta say something though. It's not entirely. I mean, he already had black players on the Alabama team, though. I hate to historically, but the problem was they were already freshmen. They were back in those days. You couldn't play as freshmen, so he had
freshman teams,
players that were on the team already. So that story gets popularized, and sure, it wasn't all white team, and I think that it had an effect. But integration was going to happen at that point. I mean, it was a fact of life. You had Florida the year before with Willie Jackson Sr. His son, Willie Jackson Jr., was a great receiver for Steve Spurrier and his Gator teams in the 90s. Terry Jackson was a phenomenal running back with the Glory Year Gators with Jaquez Green and Ike Hilliard and all them. But it was a cultural touchstone. There was an ESPN 30 for 30 about that. Sam Bam Cunningham went into Birmingham, Alabama, and ran all over Bear Bryant's all-white Alabama team.
Well, I guess the main point to draw out of that is the fact that it was a process that was going to happen, desegregation due to the struggle to desegregate, but also the fact that it was literally wrecking white people and white institution colleges to be racist and not allow African Americans to play sports with you. That's essentially is sort of like this right wing, libertarian viewpoint about how racism won't exist because it's bad for the market for racism to exist. Because if you're a racist company, then all of a sudden, the market's going to make you pay because consumers won't buy from you because you're
we are right.
Well, how about if everybody's racist? Then you got to buy from and essentially that's what was the tactic of PWIs to really, HBCUs are an institution in itself that has a lot of power because it is an organization of Black-led colleges. They are inherently institutions that have been born out of struggle. Most historically Black colleges were created by individuals fighting to provide education for African Americans and poor people in those areas. They were born out of struggle. Therefore, due to the fact that the wide majority of great athletes who play football are African American, they had a much higher advantage in regards to having a better product than quote unquote product. I don't mean to say it like that, but you know what I mean. That they were going to have a much better program than predominantly white institutions as it kept going. So of course, what do you do if you're like the powers that be at Texas A&M and these other big powerhouse kind of old Southwestern what do you do to deal with that potential threat to overruling over college football and the money that comes with it? You have to fucking do these tactics like Nate just said about barring, not playing them, totally isolating them, and also taking other manners, like Nate, went to Florida State with me. There's so much history with how Florida State's dynamic with FAMU, historically Black college, and taking land from them, taking buildings from them, taking resources.
Well, Mike, talk about just the visual reality of it. I mean, it's people think of how the segregation signs have come down in the South. I mean, it's so visible there. I mean, the train tracks at Railroad there and how the FSU's up on the hill, and you just clearly see the line of demarcation there of what the Jim Crow barrier was in very visible terms to this day.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah.
No, yeah, in Tallahassee, you know, and you have Florida State University, which started off as a women's college, and then, you know, became co-gendered. And you also have FAMU, and literally across the tracks is the historically Black university. And you look at the buildings, look at the investment. There's much more at Florida State University. You know, FAMU doesn't get the resources that it deserves as an institution, of course, because it's a historically Black college. I mean, that's just how national oppression in this country works. You have schools like Florida State that get most of the funding because they are predominantly white institutions with an alumni base of active members of the ruling class in that state. You know, college, man. To think about colleges really freaks me out, because I'm like, wow, the ruling class, you know, these people who run these corporations involved with these chamber of commerce, heads of the Republican Party, you know, even Democratic Party, they send their kids to these colleges and perpetuate themselves. You know what I'm saying? They send their kids to these colleges and they, you know, become head of this organization on campus, and then they just reproduce that ideology and like reproduce that institutionally in terms of policy, even at like those predominantly white institutions. I don't know, just that was a short digression, because, you know, that always freaks me. I'm like, what the, you know, these people like are constantly like using colleges as a means to rule. And, you know, we had that case, you know, these people are the boosters, you know, who fund these college programs and pay these like athletes. You know, these people, you know, the people who are paying for like Bragg Field at Texas A&M, that state-of-the-art stadium. I mean, they're like, you know, they will make sure that Texas A&M as a school doesn't take any type of like progressive stances, you know, because they're pouring millions of dollars into these schools. And there's actually a, fascinating enough, on Netflix, I don't know if you saw, Nate and Miguel, there's a documentary about the guy. The name was Peter Singer. He was the
he led the the Singer was the guy that led the whole like cheating scandal to help wealthy people get their rich kids into like colleges
to get into the school.
Yeah.
Okay.
No,
I haven't seen it yet. I've been meaning to watch it.
No, it really goes into stuff about how these colleges work, and like how, you know, you thinking that you're giving $500,000 to a college like Stanford University doesn't mean anything to them. You know, they only care about it if you're paying like $10 million. You know, so the people who are able to give these monies to these major colleges, these people run society. You know, these are the people you talk about when you talk about the 1%. Like, you know, you go to Florida State University, you go to like Cal State, any school, there's these people who buildings are named after them, you know, and they're still living. I mean, they're able to move a lot of, you know, influence, you know, and in turn push their agenda. You know, these are the people who are like criticizing Texas players for not listening to a racist ode, you know, or allegedly racist ode, you know, like these are the people you have to deal with at Mississippi State who are trying to criticize Kylan Hill.
Yo, Mike, if I could jump in here real quick, I gotta like share this. This is like what you see on the screen here is from you know, a picture of Billy Joe, who was a later FAMU coach with Jim Tressel, who became the Ohio State coach, and then before that was at Youngstown State before a game. I just want to read a couple excerpts from this, like, and this relates to like the conversation I had with Professor White. I'll have part 2 out by either later this week or maybe this weekend, depending on the best time to put it out. You know, just got the video out for part 1 a couple few days ago. But it goes, you don't really know what the high point was. All right, sorry, before this context, like the 50s and 60s, I really believe, and I think it's very fair. You look at the number of NFL players, Florida A&M's dominance. I mean, even my dad always talked about, like, you know, as a kid growing up in segregated Jacksonville, like he was born in 53. And they integrated, like started his junior year, senior year at high school at Lee High School, which is now, there's a whole movement now to get the name changed to Robert E. Lee High School, which I used to coach at and is mostly Black and needs to be changed. and I'll be speaking actually tomorrow night at a public meeting in Jacksonville in support of that. The rhetoric to keep the name is insane, but nonetheless, like
so rally at 4:30.
What's that?
There's a rally at 4:30 in front of Lee. You should be there.
All right, I'll be there. I'll be there for sure. All right, so like the whole history is that you had a dominant program. Like the way people think of Alabama football under Nick Saban was Florida A&M football under Jake Gaither. And so Bear Bryant, to be fair to the Big Game James, like that story is not completely wrong in the sense that even though like he had signed a black player, that's not unusual. There had been like Ohio State had, Bill Bell, who was the FAMU head coach right before Jay Gaither. He had played college football at Ohio State in the 30s. But the difference was back then they were individual instances of a black player. It was Paul Robeson playing at Rutgers in the early 20th century, right? It wasn't that like Northern schools had black players before, but the difference was like individual examples of exceptionalism. And how often do we see that where the ruling class tries to like cover up the larger systemic failures by looking at and pointing to individual instances of like, oh, this guy's done well, this minority's the perfect example of you want to follow. And that wasn't going to lead. Jake Gaither's view was to, and he was a complicated figure. He didn't always have the best politics. He was trying to build an organization. He grew up in an era where, he was trying to protect his players and it was about survival and whatnot. And so, but he did really hope, and his vision was that they would be able, when integration happened, they would be able to actually play PWIs. They played a school, University of Tampa, that doesn't even have football anymore, and beat them. And that was the first time that happened. It was in the late 60s. But the reality is once it got integrated, once like that 1970 game at Legion Field in Birmingham happened where USC ran all over Bear Bryant's Alabama team that was all white. They had a black guy on the freshman team. But who knows? The integration might not have come in such a quick way where he went and aggressively went after and signed as many black players as he did. But the irony is that was the death knell essentially for the dominance of what Florida A&M had been. And because those schools like Alabama, I was actually at the first ever time when the University of Florida played FAMU, 2003 in the Swamp. They won 63-3, and that was after they, it was already safe to play HBCUs because there was no threat they were going to lose. And smaller schools need those checks. They need the money from playing those big money games. And to be quite honest, a lot of the players like playing in those because it's a chance to play in a big time environment, have a lot of fans. So there's a lot of levels of complexity to that. But the article here just talks about the level of dominance so after the post-World War II era was really when this happened. From 1945 until about 1969, the Rattlers of Florida A&M were one of two anchors of black college football alongside Eddie Robinson's Grambling State team. 9 years after Gaither's retirement, under Woody Hayes' assistant, Rudy Hubbard. And it's also noteworthy that Woody Hayes, people like racist Clemson head coach Frank Howard, would come actually and help out at Jake Gaither's coaching clinics in Tallahassee at FAMU. Even though segregation existed on the individual level, this is one of the contradictions. People like Howard, who were, as Professor White points out, during when Clemson played Maryland and they had the first black player. This was Maryland integrated a little sooner. They're kind of in one of the border states there up along the Mason-Dixon line. He spent the whole game calling them the N-word, riling up the Clemson fans. They're like getting their head and all. But then he could also be extraordinarily kind to Jay Gaither and give of his time. It kind of ties into that notion of like white racism in the South of like a lot of it, you can be nice to the individual, but fear the collective. Now, why do they fear the collective? Well, because that's power and that threatens their little station and stuff. So they could be nice and like individuals and still be extraordinarily racist. But FAMU from 45 to 69, but it started to slide, as it said here, after going, they basically didn't lose to anybody from those years. It was unbelievable level of dominance. And he was hoping that they would just be able to become part of the college football system. But racism, national oppression, I think got in the way of that. But I think we need Paul Robeson. Absolutely, Neil. Yeah. Paul Robeson was an All-American running back at Rutgers, along with being the first black actor to play Othello in a Shakespeare play without wearing blackface. without it being just a white guy in blackface. Robeson, and then went to the Soviet Union and said that took a lot of heat, the House Committee on Un-American Activities.
They tried to pit him against Jackie Robinson.
Absolutely, yeah. Robinson wrote in his memoirs how he feels an enormous amount of guilt about like how he was kind of, kind of felt he was used as a pawn, and that is one of the stains kind of on Robinson's legacy. But I mean, it's ultimately, I'm not going to sit here and trash on Jackie right now. But oh, cool, Neil. Yeah. I mean, as a high school English teacher before, I've done a lot of Shakespeare stuff too, man. But Robeson was just an amazing, amazing human being. If you ever want to go to YouTube and check out, it's James Earl Jones, reading the script of Robeson's testimony before the House, before the Congressional Committee on Un-American Activities. You had Senator Stennis, Senator Eastman from Mississippi, the notorious racist. I mean, Senator Eastman had Fannie Lou Hamer living on his plantation, and all these other people, and they had poverty made them where, even though they were literally free, this was in the 50s and 60s, they couldn't really go anywhere because they were in debt and they were in slavery by another name, right? So these are all things that tie in and help us that create this modern day reality. And I think we should segue now. We could talk HBCU football, and you really should check out this Professor White discussion, part 1. Part 2, we get into a lot more stuff that's I think really fascinating too, because really Gaither was really instrumental in developing coaching and the pedagogy of it. And when he first started coaching at Florida A&M, they didn't even recruit players from the South, from the state of Florida, Mike. You might find this interesting. All their players were black players from the Northeast and big cities up north, because the coaching, there wasn't really the organization. They didn't have the education resources in Florida to really develop a strong high school football and youth coaching structure. So there weren't it wasn't until Gaither put that in place in the 30s and then 40s that really helped provide that as a resource with these coaching clinics that got coaches from all over the country. It's also notable that Gaither got his, PhD. I think it was either big master's. I think he has actually a PhD at Ohio State. Bill Bell, the head coach before him. So, Gaither's a fascinating character. But let's get on. I want to transition to our topic, which is because we're not going to have to kind of go a little quicker than I'd like, but to the NFL owners and their relationship to the means of production. And I don't know who wants to. Mike, you want to kick it off, or Miguel? I'm gonna finish up. All right, Mike will kick it off with the Shahid Khan, the first person of color. I guess the Buffalo Bills have a South Korean I guess a co-owner, she and her husband own the team. Yeah. Anyways, it sort of shows the hollowness of representation when you talk about this. But Mike, why don't you tell us about who Shahid Khan is, and owner of the Jacksonville Jaguars since 2012?
Shahid Khan. He's a Pakistani American billionaire and a sports tycoon, according to Wikipedia. Shahid Khan is worth $8 billion. He's originally from Pakistan. Came here to attend the University of Illinois, and he got a degree in industrial engineering. So when you think of Toyota and the bumpers, think of Shahid Khan. He's the owner of Flexingate, which is an American automotive company, one of which, labor union that we have, of course, we support all unions. The United Auto Workers have.
Whoa! We don't support all unions,
except cop unions. But we support. we support all the unions that don't murder people and
fight. Fuck the police union.
So Shahid Khan.
Look at this, Mike.
Also, he's the owner. Also, he's the owner and head of AEW, All Elite Wrestling, which is a competitor now to the WWE, World Wrestling Entertainment. So he's also the head of that. Funny enough, he also piloted and helped jumpstart a network with what's the football player from Oklahoma, JC. He used to be a JC Wyatt. JC Watts. Yeah. Yep. Black network. I think it's called the Black Network, based out of Tallahassee. It's a black kind of news network, basically funding that. anti-union.
He owns a soccer team, I think, too, right?
Yeah, and also he's also owner of Fulham, a team that constantly is getting regulated.
They're not one of the better Premier League teams, but
no.
Yeah, but they keep going down.
He's making money either way, though, man.
Yeah, he's making money either way. I mean, and of course, he purchased the Jacksonville Jaguars after Wayne Weaver, former Jaguars owner, who got his wealth from was it Key 9? Is that the stores, the shoe stores?
Oh no, 9 West Shoes.
9 West and Shoe Corner. He was the owner of those stores. That's how he became rich enough to buy a football team. Shahid Khan became rich enough to buy a football team from making billions of dollars from being the sole creator of bumpers that go on Toyota cars in the Northern Hemisphere. That's what he does. That's how he makes his money. So it's a theme. These like NFL owners usually more than anything, except if they're generational to an extent. But especially if they're newer owners in the past 20-something years, they get their wealth from an outside endeavor that they run or have gotten big from. And Shahid Khan got his wealth off of automobile parts. The interesting thing about Shahid Khan is he is the first like minority owner, especially one with like a majority stake. I'm sure they've had some like oppressed nationalities or somebody like buy in at like a small share of these football teams. It's interesting is like in Jacksonville, he's tried to push forth like development deals that overwhelmingly benefit his pockets more than regular working class people. He's undoubtedly a capitalist that believes in fighting unions off and making as much profit as you can. That's something that is undeniable. However, it is interesting that he has shown support for something like a $20 minimum wage. I think Shahid Khan will be what you consider part of the more liberal wing of the bourgeoisie or the ruling class, in which he supports things like a $20 minimum wage. He supports, he's supported protests, not necessarily protests, but he came out against Trump's like immigration ban. Because he is also Muslim and Pakistani, so he's affected by that, and maybe he has people, family and friends who also are affected by that. He's taking stances against that. Oddly enough, he gave like $200,000 to Hillary Clinton when she ran, and then when Trump won, he gave $500,000 to Trump's inaugural, committee as well.
Yeah, man.
Just so you see how these people work, they work with both sides, like both parties, like both parties are ruled by the billionaires, and how the billionaires see it is like, all right, I'm going to give you money. Okay, you lost. Okay, I'm going to give you money. Like this is how politics works.
Mike, but the union costs are too high. Look at that there.
Yeah, it's just too much to give people benefits and sick leave.
It's just,
think about it from the perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah, how else? Like, think about it. These people who become really ultra rich, like there's a reason why the CEO of UPS isn't like a top 10 billionaire, but the CEO of Amazon is, what does the union do? What does workers being organized in a company do? They get their money that they deserve. Yep. Like they're not getting as much as they should, and that's why you have to struggle and fight for it. But they're getting a much bigger piece of the pie than not. And these billionaires like a Shahid Khan, they profit and become top 10 billionaire in the country, or become this or that, due to the fact that they're able to like suppress workers like organization. from coming together and demanding higher wages, from demanding more benefits, better pay increases, and stuff like that. Like I'm sure he pays them more than $20 an hour, but maybe he doesn't, but I'm sure he doesn't give them the benefits that they do. Like you gotta like think about it from that perspective. But he's been criticized for a lot of things. And I think he like he's part of that elite club of 32 NFL owners who have a huge impact on how society moves. I mean, these NFL owners, set policy for the city, set policies and agenda for the states that they're in. Like states cater to these billionaires, give them tax breaks, tax breaks, that could be easily reinvested. Like the city of Jacksonville was planning on giving Shahid Khan like over $200 million in taxpayer money to develop a entertainment district by the stadium. Think about what that $200 million could have been invested in other things in the city. But these owning an NFL franchise basically gives you, as a billionaire trying to get more public money, because you don't want to spend your money, you want the people's money. It gives you so much leverage over these cities, because one of the biggest things in Jacksonville has really been controversial is about how Jacksonville is always fearful of losing the Jacksonville Jaguars. And they get tax breaks, they get preferential, tax incentives, stuff like that. And there's always that fear of, we have to give him $200 million in taxpayer money. We have to build him a new stadium for $1 billion, because if not, he's going to leave and take the franchise with him.
That's just how the NFL works. I mean, it's like Roger Goodell's an NFL economic hitman. I mean, you look at like Atlanta, they built the Georgia Dome, opened in 93, 94, and they got a new stadium opening up in 2017, Mercedes-Benz Stadium. I mean, is the new norm going to be you got to build a new stadium less than every 25 years?
That's what's happening in baseball. That's what happened in baseball. Like
Texas Rangers, right?
And also the Atlanta Braves. Like they had Turner Field for the Olympics. That was in 96?
Yeah, 96. Yeah.
Now they have a new stadium. Same thing with the Rangers.
So it's like in college football programs, there's an arms race to always rebuild the workout facilities, rebuild the sleeping pods and the locker rooms, because you aren't paying the work, you aren't paying the players. So you just want to put more money into getting the best recruits and stuff like that. That's an arms race that occurs in college and NFL. Like y'all saying, it's the stadium's arms race. So of course, that's the nature of the game. I think in the terms of, well, at least from the perspective of Jacksonville, I think, there's
Mike, just so people know what sleeping pods are. This is Louisiana State University's football locker room here. So, you got, and the reality is these players, I'm not going to get in beds, because they have to spend their entire lives. They're not getting to go interact throughout the campus during the day. They're building these things super, super posh like this because they want to be confined in these facilities.
It's kind of like, have you how Google and other tech companies will have all these facilities at their office for the workers? So you're pretty much, in a way, you live there.
But it's such a it's funny how it's funny how this is such an evolution for collegiate, athletics, but in a way it goes back to the literal, these companies moving back to apartment complexes in their original origins were built literally next to factories. So it gives the workers an easy, that's why these living dormitories existed, but it's kind of indirectly going back to that, you know what I'm saying? In which we have to put sleeping pods in the college football facilities so the athletes can have a place to nap and sleep, because we literally have them there 12 hours a day and they're not getting paid for it. That's pretty wild to think about.
And look at Ed Ogeron, the head coach, just walking by, watching the guys oh, look, he's taking a nap. This is great. Did Booster got this money lined up? So it's pretty wild there. I mean, but
that's just one school.
So I guess to wrap it up on so I guess to wrap it up on Giant Con. I think
here's your man right here, Mike.
That's your boy. Yeah,
and there he is with Bob Kraft of the New England Patriots, our Zionist.
He's definitely part of the liberal wing. I mean, I believe Jacksonville was the only football team to have a BLM march. So he hasn't necessarily, I guess there was criticisms, I guess, of like the way that Tom Coughlin and Doug Marrone, like one of the players, I forget his name, he was like a cornerback. He got released. He complained about some like racial kind of stuff in regards to like the player protest that was happening with Colin Kaepernick and how they went to Con and he apparently took the side of the play, Right. So I guess on terms of identity, national identity, so racial stuff, he's definitely not like a Cal McNair of the Texans,
No.
Bob McNair of the Texans. He's not, he's not
the face of the American dream, Mike.
Oh yeah, he's the American dream capitalist. Anybody
here's an immigrant that made
anybody
a billionaire.
He's an immigrant.
Immigrant turned billionaire. His innovative car design gives hope to the Rust Belt. Now he's seen to cure football's biggest headache. Yeah. So, anyways, I mean, you get the idea. Oops, I mean, one more just because I can't help myself here.
So he has a big yacht. He has this huge yacht
just to
that
show
Jay-Z
off.
and Beyonce rent.
So there you go. I mean, but he can't afford that. Those unions are too expensive, though, right?
Oh my.
Those unions, like, why do you need somebody else, Nate? I'm your man. I'm your friend.
Here he is in Jacksonville flying the Union Jack behind his boat.
So, this is a real question. What do we do with the yachts after the revolution? Are they like people's vacation?
Take them over.
Yeah. Well, we set up a system in which you could rent out this yacht 2 hours. No, you could rent out for 1 day. We'll have a long ass waiting list though.
Yeah.
Well, there'll be a lot of yachts to seize.
There'll be a lot of them. So I mean,
you gotta seize
look at that right there. He's just a good guy, Mike. Why do you want to take away the fruit of all his hard work?
He has a helicopter pad. I think he has a helicopter pad, doesn't it?
When the revolution comes, where will you hide?
Anyway, so let's move it on right now to the Oakland. I mean, now Las Vegas Raiders.
Las Vegas, yeah.
And look, I mean, I kind of like Al Davis. I'm going to be honest because he was
same thing. Besides being a Raiders fan,
I mean, he wasn't one of the wealthiest guys, but he's not. He's dead now anyway. So I mean, I guess we're gonna be talking more about Mark Davis, his son now, who unlike Al didn't really. I mean, Al was born in like a working class
in Brooklyn
neighborhood, so it's a little different story. It's kind of like Jimmy Hoffa Jr. with the Teamsters. His dad was grew up an actual union organizer, right, and was hated by the ruling class. His son is a sellout who is sells out UPS's workers and other Teamsters membership. So maybe you could draw a parallel. But tell us about Mark Davis, Miguel, from the Las Vegas Raiders.
Mark Davis is the son of Al Davis and of Carol Davis. So Carol Davis and Mark Davis. Carol Davis is Al Davis' wife. So him and his mom, Mark Davis and his mom, are the owners of the team. They own 47% of the team. Mark Davis took over the team after Al Davis passed away in October 2011. And he's actually, I think, the owner with the least value as his personal value.
I'm sorry, can we stop real quick and just appreciate that haircut for a minute?
Dumb and Dumber.
Continue, my man.
It's always what I think about when I see his haircut. Yeah, I know my hair's all
sorry,
good.
Miguel, I couldn't help myself, man.
It's all good. Yeah. So yeah, he took over the team. So that's one reason a lot of owners didn't take Mark Davis serious because of the way he looks and stuff. And he's Al Davis' kid, but he's actually smarter than what he looks, I guess.
It's possible that Al Davis looks healthier than his son.
Oh my God, that's even worse. Mike, maybe we can. What do you think? If I
looks
like
like
a friendly bet sometime, and if I lose, the punishment will be I have to get my hair cut like that.
Oh, and he
looks
goes
like
to the same barber that he's been going for over 20 years in Southern
And the
California
barber's
in
like,
Riverside
"No, man,
County.
like, you can't go anywhere else, my man. This is like definitely the cut you need."
he has like a John Gruden. If John Gruden got like stuff with a vacuum, like from behind, like the vacuum was just pulled everything back.
Well,
Kinda reminds me of Stewart
I
from
do have to
Mad
agree that
TV.
Shad Khan's mustache. Are you talking about Shad Khan's mustache is impressive? Yeah, it would have been 5 minutes ago. But yeah, Mini Ninja, you're right there. I mean, they are, effing ugly. So go ahead, Miguel. Let's keep it rolling, my man.
Yeah, so Mark Davis took over the team in 2011. He's the son of Al Davis. So if you don't know about Al Davis, he was born in Brooklyn, and he bought the Raiders in 1966 with 6 other partners, and all he spent was $18,000, and the money he came up with was from his coaching, because as we mentioned earlier, or Nate mentioned earlier, Al Davis was a coach, USC, LA Chargers, then ended up a Oakland Raiders coach, and then ended up AFL commissioner, and then after that's kind of when he ends up becoming the owner of the Raiders. And then when the merger happens, he takes majority of the team in 1972. So anyways, Mark Davis owns the team now since 2011. Mark Davis is one of the owner that's with the least personal value. He's worth $500 million, which is still a lot of money.
Not a lot of money as far as
I wonder if
he was from Brockton, Massachusetts, which is like a poor neighborhood, but he grew up in Brooklyn. Anyways, whatever.
I wonder if his net worth is valued from the team itself.
Talking about his dad real quick, in terms of Al, but he basically moved out west. For those of you who don't know, the San Diego Chargers began as the Los Angeles Chargers for 1 year in 1960 before they moved to San Diego. And then they had such terrible attendance that 1 year that they became the San Diego Chargers. And then they moved, I guess you could say back to LA in 2017. But it's clearly that wasn't where they came to be what people know them as. But yeah, what were you saying, Mike?
My bad, Nate.
Something happened there. All right. So, anyways, let's shut up and just let Miguel go. You tell us when you need us to hop in.
All right. So, yes, Mark Davis, is majority owner now. He actually just bought the WNBA's Las Vegas Aces. So now he's ventured into another team. So with the Raiders ownership, Al Davis family has the majority. So Mark Davis, but they have 6 other minority owners that were the original families with Al Davis that were the owners in 1966. So it's gone passed down to their families, but nobody really knows too much about them. Some of them were like business owners in the Bay Area, but Al Davis's family, Mark Davis, have had control of the team this whole time. In 2007, they sold 20% of the team to 3 Wall Street hedge fund investors. And there's not a lot of details on them either, but I did find information on one of them, which is David Abrams of Abrams Capital Management. So apparently he's one of those 3 investors, and he manages hedge funds for like Wells Fargo, the student loan company, Navient. I don't remember the name, but the one that has a lot of, they all have problems, but so he has all these other investments. So Mark Davis has control of the team, but he's obviously not all the money. But he did make the biggest deal in NFL history for a stadium and free public money when he moved the team to Las Vegas. And he got a help from pretty much the most wealthiest, powerful person in Las Vegas, who just recently passed away, Sheldon Adelson. So he paid $650 million of his own money to fund the stadium for Mark Davis. and I think the total was $750 million overall that he got in funding for Mark Davis. However, this is in 2016, but a year later, Mark Davis and Sheldon Adelson had like a falling out because I think Sheldon Adelson thought he was going to get like a minority ownership of the Raiders. So they had a little falling out, but I thought that was interesting that pretty much Mark Davis made a deal with one of the most wealthiest Zionists in the United States. So Sheldon Adelson funded a lot of Zionist projects. He funded a lot of money to Trump as well, which was like, I think $50 million back in 2016. So that was just an interesting angle that I found from the Raiders. That wasn't an owner, but helped fund the Raiders to move to Vegas.
Yeah, I just put in the chat, did at least the money towards the Raiders money he couldn't send to Israel like he does with most of the rest of his philanthropy, right? So, yeah, I mean, it's pretty crazy. I mean, you look at like the transformation of the Raiders and what's happened with them. I mean, from being the Bay Area, the bad boys of the Bay, Darth Vader. They got people dressed up, people having a chance.
Like, and our fan base is like a working class fan base.
Absolutely,
known as a working class fan. Yeah, right. So just like Pittsburgh Steelers fans, Browns fans. So, but now we're in Vegas,
right? And I think it's worth doing this, honestly. Like real quick, to pull this up, I'm gonna show a clip about just how much the Raiders meant to people in Oakland when they moved to LA, and then also when they moved to and just will react on the backside of this. But it's something to see, and I think it'll help kind of bring into context a little bit about why people had the affinity they do for the Raiders, and how it's like kind of continued even when they've moved to LA and now Vegas and broken people's hearts. So this is from 1987, and check it out.
Angeles Raiders, no longer the Oakland Raiders, but diehard fans still know and love them as the Oakland Raiders.
Tonight, a close-up look back at that club in a special sports report prepared by Christine Hansen and Mark Redspin.
This is the story of a football team. A team that won many games and became Super Bowl champions.
This was the finest hour in the history of the Oakland Raiders. Take pride and be proud. Your commitment to excellence and your will to win will endure forever. You were magnificent.
Then one day, the team moved from the city where they were loved to another place, a place down south.
I felt real betrayed. Like you lost your best friend.
It's the story of how a sports bar was affected.
We suffered the whole bit. We suffered economically, of course, and we suffered emotionally.
It's a story of how that team isn't quite the same anymore. And it's a story of how some fans will go to great lengths to see their old team. But before we look at the present, let's go to the past, to the Oakland Coliseum, to tailgate parties, to diehard fans to whom Raider football was an obsession. It was a time of spectacular games and spectacular players. They had names like Stabler, Bolitnikoff, Otto, and Upshaw. It was the roster of victory.
We are the champions, not of the world, but of the planet!
In January of 1981, the Oakland Raiders had just won the
I think
Super
the
Bowl
world and the
for
planet
second
are
time.
kind of the same thing, but
Riding was already on the
whatever.
ball regarding their move to the more profitable Los Angeles Coliseum. This was to be the last Super Bowl victory parade down the streets of Oakland. But the fans and the players still hung on to a glimmer of hope.
And I'll do everything in my power to make sure the Raiders stay in Oakland. But as far as my power compared to Al, I'm just a little pawn in the game of chess.
It was checkmate for Northern California Raider fans. Some would turn against their old team. They would not wish the so-called LA Traitors success.
I'm not a Raider fan no more, and I hope they lose all their games and have a very small crowd.
Some fans turned to the nearby San Francisco 49ers. Others couldn't.
I don't like the 49ers at all. So my heart's in LA now.
The wine and cheese Niners, right?
Yep, Silicon Valley now.
Well, they left me, went to LA. Now we got the Niners. I couldn't do that. I liked the Raiders for so long, so many years. I just couldn't jump the wagon just to go across the bay.
The city joined the ranks of the newly formed USFL.
Trump was the owner of the New Jersey Generals in this league. They had Herschel Walker.
Of what once was.
They were there rooting for the invaders, but they were thinking about the Raiders.
Rooting for the invaders, thinking about the Raiders. So Oakland has lost the Raiders twice now.
Yep, and they also lost the Warriors across the bay.
Yeah.
Locked up and deserted. But reminders of
Ken Stabler, you see the name in the parking spot there? Yeah.
Those legends returned last August for a reunion football game between the Raiders and the
Yeah, so in '86 they brought him back to reenact like the immaculate, those famous Raiders Steelers playoff games and that crazy perception bullshit.
Ricky Sports Bar. It's a famous Raiders bar.
Yeah.
Tatum, Chester.
At Ricky Sports Bar in San Leandro, people don't say Los Angeles when they say Raiders. They put their money where
R.I.P. Richie.
Big selling thing are Oakland Raider T-shirts, anything that says Oakland Raiders on it. Pennants, T-shirts, sweatshirts. They don't want anything that says LA. I have people that drive.
They don't want any LA Raider stuff. They were in LA, for those of y'all don't know, from '82 to '94. Moved back to Oakland in '95, and then just moved to Vegas last year.
He and his girlfriend are flying from Oakland to Los Angeles to see the Raiders take on the Denver Broncos.
I can't really get too much of seeing them on TV, so I like to see them live, and I just don't mind going down to LA to see the Raiders play.
It's game day at the Los Angeles Coliseum, and tailgate parties are the same no matter where you go. The sounds, the sights, and the traditions continue. But look closely at this crowd, and you'll spot members of the still active Bay Area Raiders Booster Club.
We've been doing this about 4 or 5 years, about one game a year. It's a bit of a splurge, but it's fun. We have a good time.
They board buses, cars, and planes, all because of a devotion to the silver.
This really gives you insight into just like the mindset of fanhood right here. Working class fans.
But you kind of miss that.
Pretty much what me and my friends did, going from
but it's a lot easier to get tickets here than it was in Oakland.
Yeah.
That's because the old Raiders sold out every game. Not so in Los Angeles, where today 30,000 empty seats will greet the players as they take the field.
Raiders! Come on! Raiders!
It's not the same when you LA Coliseum.
It would not be a good day for the Silver and Black. They would lose a record 7th straight game. For the Raiderettes, there would not be much to cheer about. So what's the problem? Did the team lose something when it switched cities? We put the question to the father of running back Marcus Allen.
Have the Raiders changed since they moved from Oakland?
Well, they got a little bit timid, so they got to kind of a little rougher.
Does Marcus think that?
Well, I think that, you don't talk too much about it,
Some say the Raiders have gone Hollywood, and certainly there is evidence of that in the parking lot. Maybe the blame, though, lies with the fans. Perhaps they're not as loyal.
Down here, they have a lot of other things that they're interested in besides us. Up in Oakland, we were a small community, and they were a great group of people that followed us. I think they were more knowledgeable than any fans I've ever seen.
One of my favorite memories in professional football happened in 1979 when, after a Raider game, 4 people waited for me, and I wasn't even a starter at the time. And these 4 corner dudes said, "We wanted to tell you that was a hell of a block you had in that punt return in the 3rd quarter." And I thought, what's not to like about these people? They really know football.
Will Oakland fans ever know hometown NFL football again? One LA fan had some thoughts on the subject.
The NFL, they said that they're going to get some more teams, and Oakland's going to get their team, right?
Yeah, he didn't know.
Dirty and black and blue as the Raiders used to be when they initially started out.
In '95, they
need to have a team that can come in there to motivate and dictate. we got them here in Los Angeles. We ain't gonna give them up.
Yeah, you are. Yep. Yeah, you will.
Rather start an expansion team like they did and build a team. Don't get an outcast.
The Raiders would rather not. Oakland would rather not have a team if they aren't named the Raiders.
Start small.
Whatever happens, many Northern Californians will.
Anyways, that's enough. I mean, but you get the idea. I mean,
Yeah, that was good.
Anything you want to say? Reaction to just Miguel?
That was a good video of showing Raider fans and Raider culture, since we're a big working class fan base. And as a Raider fan growing up, when I became a Raider fan, they were LA Raiders. But my cousin was a Raider fan when they were Oakland, even though he was from Southern California as well. But when they moved to Oakland right when I was actually really starting to watch football.
Mm-hmm.
So growing up, and when I became an adult, I actually, started going to games with my friends, just like they showed there, where the Oakland fan was driving down to LA. It switched once they moved back to Oakland. LA fans would go to Oakland, and now they're in Vegas. Fans are gonna. Well, they didn't have fans this year, but there's gonna be fans that are gonna be going from Oakland and LA to Vegas, which I think that was one of Mark Davis' strategies, because he knows the Raider fan base is pretty much the whole state of California and a lot of the West Coast. There's a lot of Raider fans. So I think him having the team move to Vegas was also very strategic, because either he knows that there's still going to be Oakland fans and the LA fan base that are going to go to Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
Even with the prices going up, there's still going to be fans going.
Right.
Some will be priced out because there's going to be, more elite, wealthy people going to games. Kind of like LA for Laker games.
Right.
But he knows that working class fan base is going to follow them, because it's just
and some will just spend more money than they probably should out of the budget, right? And then end up having to cut other stuff, which is sad, But yeah, I mean, anything else? What I'm thinking we'll do is getting a little late. Is I'm going to do the 49ers along with Miguel, and I'll save the Jets till next week. All right, and we'll catch up and do 5 one of these weeks. But yeah, Mike, you got to roll.
No, yeah, I got a roll. But last part I wanted to bring up, I think we talked about the purpose of them moving to Vegas. I think, California is considered a high tax state. Nevada having no state income tax plays a factor to these billionaires and how they think about things. And I say that to say, earlier we talked about Shaq Khan and the Jacksonvilles and how like these really teams use their existence as leverage against these cities in like on negotiations over property, over taxpayer money, and things of that nature. I think it's difficult for me to see that being taken seriously in Jacksonville, from the extent of Jacksonville is in Florida. It is a no income tax state. And there was actually a graph that kind of shows cities that have grown since the pandemic. And like Jacksonville was it's hard for me to find where the study was from. Jacksonville was second. Number one was Salt Lake City. So, you look at the states that had the more laissez-faire kind of pandemic policies, where like rich people want to go because, in these places you have lower minimum wage, lower wages, lower health care. You have a means to like make much more money than you could in a state in which you had to pay higher taxes and stuff like that.
Yeah,
that's something I always think about, especially with these owners, especially with like with his son, the Raiders, not being able to, negotiate with the city another stadium. I think that's something we have to look at, like how these owners are essentially, using the weight of what the NFL is, and also the natural fan base they have with, fans who go to the games. They're able to leverage these cities to give hundreds of millions of dollars worth of taxpayer money to invest in a project that the people don't really own. Like it'd be different if these stadiums were like publicly, since they're like half publicly financed, half owned by the city, what I'm saying? But all the profits from, these, sports entertainment districts these stadiums always tend to mostly go back to the owners, never back to like the people of the city who, you know, dollars finance it. And the argument you get is, oh, if the team leaves, you lose jobs and all that. And I agree with you. You know, I definitely see that as well. But then it's like you got to see these teams as like another Amazon, you know, being built in the city.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like, you know, when they go to like you know, these cities, you know, you remember in New York, and you know, Amazon decided to build like a new headquarters in Northern Virginia because they were given such, you know, a sweetheart like tax incentives, not being able to pay taxes, certain taxes. They can even save money as opposed to moving to like a New York City. You know what I'm saying? These football teams make the same calculations. That's how these billionaires make a lot of money, because they're interested in getting as much public revenue as possible while privatizing all the profits. You know, that these projects that the NFL is able to make.
No doubt, no doubt. So I mean, I just pulled something up there real quick, and you know, I think that you basically saw the list of cities, and that was dealing with like even some smaller towns, but they were all like these towns such as you know, Monroe, Louisiana, places with like shitty labor protections, right? Like Morristown, Tennessee, places that have had the biggest jumps in like employment versus like what their unemployment rate was in like February 2020. And they're almost all these places that are like right to work type stuff. So it's like right to work for less states are the places that have been experiencing this growth. Like you alluded to, even places like in North Dakota, for instance. But you know, you got states like, you know, Florida, Texas, and Nevada have huge advantages in terms of even getting players signed to contracts. I mean, because without the state income tax, that plays a big role in that too. So, Mike, I know you got to bounce. I mean, it's been real. It's been appreciated, and we'll do this again next week. All right. So, peace, and Miguel and I will bring us home here with the 49ers. All right. So, yeah, let's do this real quick. I'm gonna. So let me share like, you know, something real quick here about Denise York and family. First of all, Denise York is the brother of Eddie DeBartolo Jr., $3.5 billion net worth. She ended up, so she's Denise DeBartolo from Youngstown, Ohio. They were, you know, we'll see in a second, like they're, you know, basically her husband, Jed York, you know, there's John York, he founded the York Laboratories.
Yeah, pharmaceutical, right?
Yeah, pharmaceutical. And then her Eddie DeBartolo Sr., the father, who died in 1994. It's been alleged has some mafia connections. You know, people can look into that on their own. But let's check out a quick video right quick before we dive into it, because I think this will give a little, not nearly as long as the last one, but I thought the last one was worthwhile because it did show like, you know, it showed like you said, the working class nature of Raider fans. Yes. And I think that was worthwhile to kind of paint this picture. So check this out about the DeBartolo family that the owner Denise York and Jed York, her husband, come from, who they are, and just like the ghoulish nature of this is pretty wild.
Oh yeah, it's Trump party.
Are praising President Trump tonight. That's after his decision to pardon former team owner Eddie DeBartolo Jr., who was convicted in a gambling fraud scandal. KPX 5's WPLE Live with the latest tweets.
Yeah, for 400,000 Louisiana governor.
Yeah, Eddie DeBartolo has informally been involved with the 49ers for more than 2 decades, but for certain fans and former players, he will forever be associated with the team, with the 5 Super Bowls that the Niners won under his leadership.
Whatever, gambling fraud, whatever, we're Niners fans. The winner. Winner, baby, the winner.
All in the Oval Office today.
Jerry Rice.
Jim Brown. That makes me sad when I see Jim Brown.
Jerry Rice, yeah. Oh, yeah, I know, man. It really is.
All on him at the White House.
His politics have gotten so
bad.
Indeed. Today is a great day for him. I'm glad to be here. And, you know, it's just
oh,
man. He went to Gruden's press conference, too.
has
And
done
Raiders
so
brought him
much
back.
in
Mississippi
NFL
Valley
football.
State
The
University.
president's largest unexpected pardon of DeBartolo is a dramatic reversal of fortunes for the former 49er owner, who pled guilty in 1998 for his role in a $400,000 bribery scheme involving a riverboat casino license in
If he
Louisiana.
pled guilty to that, it was a whole lot. It was a hell of a lot more,
$1,000,000
money changing hands.
And under the code of that scandal, transferred ownership and control of the team to his sister Denise York.
And here we are.
Exile from
Brings us to
football
the
and his
present.
beloved 49ers, however, did little to diminish the admiration of former players and fans.
As a fan, I think we understand we all make human mistakes.
Man, this
but
Cesar
I
Sanchez
think it
dude,
was a
man,
good
needs to chill here.
gesture for them doing that for him.
He might be
But
from
the
San
reaction on
Jose.
social
Actually.
media wasn't nearly as generous. Trump pardons another scammer, tweeted one. I like Eddie DeBartolo, but he still bribed the governor. What a weird thing to pardon, wrote another. Keep pardoning people who don't deserve it, added a third.
This is like a year.
People like DeBartolo are the most pressing.
San Jose State political poli-sci.
It's hard to swear.
DeBartolo was inducted into the Football Hall of Fame in 2016. He hasn't had any official role with the 49ers in years. Some wonder if a presidential pardon might just pave the way to a return to the game he loves.
Some fans, not even necessarily just of the 49ers, talking about the possibility of DeBartolo coming back to football. So in a sense, it does offer some kind of social permission, some cover for the idea that this person is not persona non grata anymore.
This pardon seemed to catch most people off guard. Now, it's being celebrated among some of the 49er faithful, but for others, it's elicited both concern and confusion. The 49ers officially said they had no comment.
Of course, right? So, anyways.
Unofficially not a part of. He's probably been doing unofficial stuff as an owner.
Oh, I'm sure he has.
Yeah.
I'm sure he has. Yeah. So like, yeah, I mean, like, what did you find? Did you find anything about the York family or the Bartolos or anything you want to say?
So, Jed York is pretty much the son of Denise Bartolo, and Bartolo York took over the team in 2008. So he's pretty much like running the team. But what I found out interesting about Jed York is he paid $3 million in a PAC in Santa Clara City Council races this past election cycle in 2020. So if you don't know about the Niners, and they have their stadium in Santa Clara, which is the city right next to San Jose, so smack in the middle of Silicon Valley. And they've been having issues with the city of Santa Clara when it comes to the stadium, because Santa Clara, I think, owns like half the stadium. They have like a stadium authority. And I guess the Niners were not paying their rent. And then September, they finally paid the rent and paid them $2.7 million in rent that they didn't refuse to pay the city because of the arguments, the issues they were having between each other. So I found that interesting. But yeah, Jed York seems to be using his money to try to influence local politics.
Yeah, I mean, basically, just to let you know, I mean, a little bit on this I found, and this is from the San Jose Inside here, looking at San Jose.
Actually, a good news site for San Jose politics, I would say.
Okay, good. So, like, basically, the mayor's like confused. You have a lot of people that are kind of like confused about what's going on here, about who's owed what money. I mean, what's your understanding? I mean, have they not paid rent? I mean, is there a miscommunication? Do the Niners think that like they don't basically owe the
Yeah, from when it first started, when they first opened the stadium, and that was when the stadium had opened when I was living in San Jose for grad school. So this is like 2014, 15. But since then, they've had issues with the city, and it's over certain like things like money from the stadium, like concession stuff, because the city has some ownership in it in the stadium, because it was privately owned for the most part. It wasn't all privately owned, but more than the one to fund the stadium, more than other stadiums, unlike the Raiders one, which was publicly funded. But the Niners was for the majority privately funded to build the stadium. But the city has some stake in it. But a lot of the issues with the rent was, I think the Niners just don't want to pay rent because they want to collect rent and keep the money. I don't know on what scheme, but maybe because they don't really have a parking lot. They have a parking lot there, but a lot of people don't there's not as much money in their ticket for parking. You know, when they charge for parking.
Oh yeah,
space,
that's
because
one of the biggest scams of anywhere. These teams are able to leverage the stadiums and then get the whole parking lot surrounding there to be like their own proprietary space to, you know, charge whatever the hell they want.
Yeah, and there was another piece of land next to the stadium when the stadium opened that was owned by some like local Santa Clara Youth Soccer League, but the Niners were trying to buy that land so they could make it in a parking lot. So there was another issue, not even between the city, but with like local citizens of Santa Clara and the Niners over this stuff. So there's been a lot of issues in the local politics between the team and the city.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty wild here. Like at AmericanMafia.com examines the history of the PA. There's a lengthy piece from 1970. You know, talk about like, you know, an Irish mobster, Danny Green, was murdered by a car bomb set off by a close pal of like named Carabia, a gambling pal of DeBartolo Sr., who made frequent trips to Tropicana and Vegas. Carabia was convicted of the murder for Green. Carabia's lawyer was Carmen Policy, the aforementioned 49ers executive under DeBartolo Jr.
Oh yeah, he was the one that would run the team for him.
Yeah. So interference. So then Moldea's interference, how organized crime influences pro football. He notes close corporate connections between DeBartolo Sr. and a company heavily influenced by Florida mafia boss Santos Traficante. I mean,
oh, man.
I mean, that is.
And then the fact that the Raiders did move, I mean, the Niners were in San Francisco. There was also a lot of mafia activity, like in San Francisco Bay Area. So I'm sure that it was all connected.
Absolutely. I mean, like Los Angeles mobster Jimmy Fradiano told an associate of Moldea that DeBartolo Sr. was very, very friendly with Carabia. He also said the two men used to go on junkets to the Tropicana. Bartolo's a pretty heavy gambler. He has Florida bank account where he, like, you know, would keep stuff parked down there. He was heavily investigated by FDLE, Florida Department of Law Enforcement.
Man, there's a lot of stuff.
Cayman Islands. And you go up here too.
This is just his dad.
This is just, yeah.
This is not even Junior who did the whole bribe with the Louisiana governor.
No, of course, yeah. Yo, here we go. Y'all have to check.
Man, we're gonna have to read this book.
Their interference.
Whoa, had no idea. Like I heard about the mafia connections, but never really looked into it.
Let me put this link here in the chat. People can check that out.
And then obviously, because Niners are in Silicon Valley, they got all the tech money backing as well there.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, here, I'm gonna also put this in the chat so it'll keep this going for later too. But that's definitely worth checking out because this guy, that's not just, you know,
the audiobook is $0.
Hey, there you go, man. So we're giving gifts out to the family, giving gifts to the sports fam and the sports as a weapon fam here. Let's see here. I can switch this real quick. Yeah, check this out though, real quick. If since we're just going down this road here, and it's I think a worthy one to go down is, well, this is like the DeBartolo family and organized crime. I mean, this is a little too maybe in depth here. I'll put this in the chat too. It'll save the chat so we can like come back later.
Okay, in the YouTube video.
Find these things. I'm just trying to make sure I don't lose these. I'm using, I'm in here, not in my usual computer. So, anyways, I think we're kind of coming up at a time. We can kind of spend 2 hours. So, Miguel, I appreciate it. I'm gonna do the Woody Johnson Jets thing next week. I'll do 2, maybe even 3.
I'm excited to hear that one. Jets have a lot of connections of politics and imperialism.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely, yeah. And Trump and Johnson and Johnson, the vaccine stuff being the news. Woody Johnson being the
he's a diplomat,
ambassador to the UK under Trump. You know, him being accused of all sorts of just inappropriate behavior, sexual harassment and stuff like that. So there's a lot to get into. I don't want to shortchange that by trying to start with that right now. So we'll save that for later. Dan Kovalik has already agreed he's going to do the Pittsburgh Steelers. Written a bunch of books, and I'm looking forward to that. And other than that, appreciate y'all hanging out, Neil and Minnie. Yeah, oops, I mistakenly illegally gambled. Yeah, it sucks when that happens, right? I mean, why these assholes on Redspin Sports trying to make it hard on everybody? We're just trying to make a little cash, right? These billionaires, well, we're just trying to feed our families, Yeah, get the fuck out of here, right? So anyway, on that note, peace.
Have a good night, man. Thanks for having me on.
Always, Miguel. It's a pleasure.
It's always fun to be on here. Thanks.
Keep fighting. Definitely, man. Love having you. Y'all take care.
All right. Have a good night.
Yep.